Okay. So guys, in the yesterday's session, we have almost all finished relevant costing. And I mean, we have finished relevant costing and we started with risk and uncertainty. So in risk and uncertainty, we have completed the expected values and then payoff tables have been done. So now let's move on to the next topic in our discussion. That would be, okay. So there are two more topics for us to cover now. One is the decision tree and the second one is the value of perfect versus imperfect information. Okay. This is not working. Disconnected this stuff. Just a second, guys. Writing pad is disconnected, it seems. Okay, sorry for that. So as I was saying, we have two more topics to do. One is the decision tree analysis and the other one is value of perfect versus imperfect information. Okay, so now when we are talking about decision tree, so this is something that you have done in your class 10. You might have done your what do you call it, there's this flow charts. You might have done flow charts in your 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard in computer subject. So that is what decision tree is all about. So what we do is we create certain decision points or decision nodes, and at each point you have a decision either to take yes or no, or else good or bad, or else whatever it is. You have two or more possible situations, and then for each of these possible situations you might have alternative outcomes: success, failure. If success, what is the net profit, or if failure, what is the net profit. Like this I can have different situations, and what I'll do is I'll just try to plot them onto a chart, and then at each point, at each node, I'll try to take a decision based on the expected values. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, nothing much more than that. It's just basically drawing a graph, and then at each point we are trying to find out whether we should take a decision, which decision should be taken, and that would be depending on the expected value calculation. Okay, probability into the value, and then sum of that. Okay, look at this. So draw the tree from left to right, show appropriate decisions and the event outcomes. So common symbols can be used, like a square is represented to show a decision point and all. You don't need to know all that stuff, ma. And anyways, they're not going to ask you to draw a decision tree in the PM examination, because it is not any more paper based exam. Since it's a computer based exam, you'll not be asked to draw a decision tree as such, but you might be asked to evaluate the values based on a given decision tree. They'll give you a decision tree and they'll ask you to calculate the values. Okay, so look at this example, then we'll move further to the next point. A university is trying to decide whether or not to advertise a new postgraduate degree program. Okay, sir, the ultimate decision is to check whether to advertisement or not to do advertisement. Okay, so this is the decision that we are going to ultimately take. So what happens if I advertise? What happens if I don't advertise? This is what we need to figure out. These are the two possible situations. The number of students starting the program is depending on the economic conditions. Okay, cool. If the economic conditions are poor, it is expected that the program will attract 40 students without advertisement. Okay, sir, without advertisement. Okay, this is one point, without advertisement. Again, the economic conditions, if they are poor, okay, see, read the sentences carefully. If the conditions are poor, it is expected program will attract 40 students without advertisement. So poor conditions, no advertisement, 40 students. Okay, this is the first part of the graph. Okay, there is a 60% chance that the economic conditions will be poor. Okay, sir, poor hone ka chances 60%. Okay, the chances of the economic conditions being poor are 60%. Okay, if the economic conditions are good, it is expected that the program will attract only 20 students without advertisement. Okay, how come are they stupid or what? If the economic conditions are good, why only 20 students will come? More students should come. Okay, whatever it is. If the economic conditions are good, without advertisement, you get 20 students. Okay, there is a 40% chance. Okay, they should not tell that. Sir, if conditions or economic conditions are poor, chances are 60, good hone ka chances 40 ultimately, na? Together it should be 100%. I don't know why they tell that. They are just making students dumb. They should not give too much information. They should let the students find out the information at least. Okay, if the program is advertised and economic conditions are poor, okay, again program is advertised, and again you have two possibles and conditions. Economic conditions are good, which is 40% chances, and economic conditions are poor, which is 60% chances. And they're telling you that with advertisement, the program is advertised and the economic conditions are poor, there is a 65% chance that the advertisement will stimulate further demand and students will increase to 50%. Okay, 50 students you will get, but the chances are only how much? 65% chance are there. That means 35% chances that number of students will not increase also. Okay, so we'll have to take that also into criteria. So here we have another decision point. No? One is increase in students, which is having 65% chance. If 65% chance is there, the number of students will increase to 50 students. Okay. Then that means 35% chance is there that no increase. 35% chance. Sir, if no increase, what will be the number of students? Achha, I have to do this in poor, no? Not, this has to be done in poor, not good. See, if the program is advertised and the economic conditions are poor, then 65% chance is there. Advertisement will stimulate further demand, number of students will increase to 40. Okay. If there is no increase, number of students will remain 40 only. Right? If economic conditions are poor, then number of students are not increasing, then the number of students will be 40 only here. Just without advertisement, whatever number of students are there, the same number of students will be there here also. And then coming to the good conditions, if economic conditions are good, there is a 25% chance that the advertisement will stimulate further demand. Okay, good conditions and increase. 25% chances are there that it will increase the number of students to 25 students. And if it does not increase, no increase in due to advertisement, which 75% chances are there, then the value would be, without advertisement, it is 20 students. 20 students it will be. Okay. So this is your decision tree, ma. This is your decision tree. What is the chart? So 0. Huh? Okay. Sir, what 0, sir? Not 0. At any situation that you are not in a position where you have no students and all. Okay. Anyways, so this is the decision tree that is given. I mean, the decision tree that we have drawn. And then at the bottom, they have given you, see, the profit expected before deducting the cost of advertisement of 15,000. So before cost of advertisement of 15,000, they are giving. Okay. At different level of student numbers are as follows. Number of students 15. If there are 15 students, profit is minus 10,000. 20 students 15,000, 40, 65 and all. So let's figure out profit at each stage of the decision tree. 25 students. If I'm having 25 students, profit is 40,000. Sir. Minus $15,000. Sir, why $15,000 minus? Because this is with advertisement. Ma. If there is advertisement, 15,000 cost we will incur. So that 15,000 has to be deducted. See, they told you the profit before deducting cost of advertisement of 15,000 is given here. So I'll have to deduct that. If there are 20 students, 15,000 minus 15,000, that's 0. 15,000 minus 15,000. Okay. Then for 50 students, 165,000 minus 15,000. Then for 40 students, 115,000 minus 15,000. For 20 students, 15,000. Don't do minus 15,000 here. This is without advertisement. Use your common sense, ma. Then for 40 students, 115,000. Okay. So from here onwards, it's pretty straightforward. Now, the decision, the value at each node can be calculated based on the predicted values or the possibilities or the probabilities, what I want to call it. So 15,000 probability is 40, 115,000 probability is 60. So 15,000 into 40% M plus 115,000 into 60% M plus MRC. That's 75,000 without advertisement. Expected value without advertisement is 75,000. And then with advertisement, again, I'll have to find out at different points. So first, let's figure out point at good. What is the value? Let's find out. So if the economic conditions are good and we are doing advertisement, what is the probability? What is the expected value? 40,000 minus 15,000, 25,000 into probability is 25%, and plus then 15 minus 50 is 0, 0 and 0, 0. So MRC is 6,250 is the expected value with the economic conditions being good and advertisement is done. And without with advertisement, if the economic conditions are poor, 165 minus 15, 150,000. 150,000 into 65% M plus then 100,000, 115 minus 15 is 100 into 35% M plus MRC. This is if the economic conditions are poor, then value would be 132,500. Now chances are 40, 60. So 60 to 50 into 40% M plus 132,500 into 60% M plus MRC. This is 82,000. So with advertisement, our maximum value, expected value, sorry, not maximum value, our expected value is 82,000. Without advertisement, expected value is 75,000. So we will go ahead and do the advertisement. So this is the ultimate decision that is taken. Advertise the campaign, run the advertisement campaign, whatever you want to call it. Ultimate decision is advertise. Alternatively, what you can do is don't deduct this 15,000 here. Don't subtract 15,000 here, ma. Rather, what you will do is calculate the expected value without advertisement cost till here. So you will get the total value here, and then from that directly minus 15,000. You will get the same value, sir. You will get 82,000 only. If you don't want to do minus 15,000 in all of these cases, directly you can subtract it from here at the end. Whatever you do, it's up to you. You will get the same value. So let's not worry about that. Sir, expected values and decision tables are clear, everybody? Confirm, quick. Yeah, okay, good. Next one, value of perfect and imperfect information. Okay, you can see here 82,000 is with advertisement, 75,000 is without advertisement. Okay. Next one, see value of perfect and imperfect information. So basically what happens is if you have more information, obviously you will get better results. So if you are drilling for some oil and if you already have the information with you, the chances of finding the oil are much higher. Therefore, you can make better profits. If you don't have the information with you, the chances would be less. Therefore, you cannot make good profits, right? So it all depends upon the information. I told you already, information is the new age oil, right? We already discussed that long back. So now, so we are going to talk about the value, how to calculate this value of perfect and imperfect information, sir. So it's basically what you can do is calculate the expected value if you don't have the information. Calculate expected value if you don't have information, and then calculate the value that you can achieve with information, and the difference would be the maximum price that you can pay for the information, right? So without information you can make $10,000. With information you can make $15,000. So that $5,000 is the value of the information. That is how we can find that out, right? Okay, so where were we? Okay, look at this example, ma. Look at this example. We'll wind up the chapter very quickly. So you have the mineral rights to a piece of land that you believe may have oil underground. Okay, there is only a 10% chance that you will strike oil if you drill, but the profit would be $200,000. It will cost you $10,000 to drill. The alternative is to not to drill at all, in which case your profit will become zero. Okay, sir, they are telling you very simply that 10% chance is there that you will find oil, and if you find oil, you will make a profit of 200,000. Cost of drilling is 10,000. Okay, accepted, sir. So let's calculate the expected value. 200,000 is the value. Expectation probability is 10%. So 200 into 10%, that's $20,000. Cost of drilling is 10,000. So that means still you will have a profit of $10,000. See, decision tree, ma. If you drill, cost will be 10,000. If you do not drill, cost will be zero. Again, once you drill, if the oil is present, your present value would be 190,000. So why 190? 200 minus 10,000, ma. 200,000 minus 10,000 cost of drilling. And if oil is not present, sir, I drilled but there is no oil, then what will happen? Obviously, I'll lose my $10,000 here. The drilling cost of 10,000 is lost, which is having 90% chances, 10% chances. So calculate the expected value 10,000. So we should go ahead and drill because our expected value is positive in case of drilling. There is zero, it is zero in case of not drilling. So we'll go ahead and do that. Next one. Before you drill, you may consult a geologist who can assess the promise of the piece of the land. Okay, promise of the piece of the land means how promising it is, whether you'll find oil or not. She can tell you whether the prospects are good or poor, but she is not a perfect predictor. If there is oil, the probability that she will say there are good prospects is 95%. Okay, sir, you take this particular geologist to a particular place and ask her, can I find oil here? If there is really oil in that particular place, 95% chances are there that she'll say, yes, there is oil in this place. And similarly, if there is no oil, the probability that she'll say prospects are poor is 85%. You take her to a place where there is no oil, she'll say that 85% of the time she can say correctly that, no, there is no oil here. So if there is oil, 95% accuracy. If there is no oil, 85% accuracy. So that means here there is 5% wrong decision chances. Here there are 15% wrong decision chances. You have total 4 possibilities in this particular case. Okay, not 2. There are 4 possibilities. Now look at this. When oil is present, 95% of the time she's going to say yes, 5% of the time she's going to say no. If oil is not present, 85% she'll say no, 15% she'll say yes. Okay, so what they are doing is they are going with a 1,000 drills as a rough estimation now. Okay, look, they're talking about expecting, assume 1,000 drills in total. Sir, why, sir? Just to make your calculation easier. You can take 100, you can take 1,000, you can take 10,000, you can take 500, any number you can take, no problem. Whatever number you are taking, absolutely fine, no problem. Okay, so first of all, if I'm going with this 1,000 drills as an example, as an estimation, assumption, out of this 1,000, I know oil can be present at 10% of the time. Sir, how do you know? We already know this now. There is only 10% chance you will find the oil. Okay, so how many times we'll find oil if I'm doing 1,000 times? 1,000 into 10%. 100 drills will find oil. 900 drills will not find oil. So this is established. Everybody confirm. 100 and 900 is clear. Okay, now if there is oil, 95% chances are there that she'll say that there is oil. So that means out of 100 times, she'll definitely 95 times she'll say yes, there is oil here. And remaining 5 times she'll say there is no oil. Similarly, if I'm doing 900 drills, 85% of the time she'll say there is no oil. 85 into 900, 85% into 900. 85% into 900. Achha, you guys are not doing. Okay, sir, answer is 0 only, na? 765 times. And then 135 times, even though there is no oil, she'll say yes, there is oil. Okay, so total times you drill is 230 times. Total times when she says there is 4 chances are 770 drills. And now we'll just put it on the table here, on the graph here. So without the geologist, expected value is 10,000. Using the geologist, now good prospects, bad prospect. Total good prospectors are good prospects Total good prospects are 230 deals. My prospectus is again company's shareholding related stuff. When company goes for initial public offering, they issue a red herring prospectus and all that stuff. So good prospects are 230 out of 1000 drills. So that is 23%. Yeah, 230 out of 1000. That's 23%. See, 23% here. And in this 230, how many times we will find oil and how many times we will not find oil? So we'll find oil 95 times out of the 230 times. 95 out of 230 times we'll find oil. See, 95 by 230, that is 41.3 percentage. And how many times we'll not find oil, sir? 135 times out of this 230 times. Where the probability you don't need to calculate because your value will become zero. Na? Anyways, there is no need of calculating this. Okay. And then similarly, if the conditions are poor prospects, then again, 5 times you will do the drilling. Even though the prospects are poor, you will do 5 times drilling where you will find oil. See, if you drill, if you find oil, the chances are 5 out of 770. 5 out of 770, that is 0.65 percentage. If you don't find oil, obviously expected values are 0. Now by using all of this, we'll just bring it down by using the probabilities and then calculate the expected value with the geologist. If it is more than 10,000 plus 7,000, sir, what is 7,000 now? Ma, expect the cost of geologist is also to be considered. Now, if geologist charges 7,000, would you use her services? Sir, without geologist, we are already getting 10,000. With geologist, we should get minimum 10,000 plus 7,000 her fee plus anything extra. Then only we will hire her. So if the expected value at E point, if it is more than 17,000, then I'll agree for this hiring her. See. So at value, expected value at point E is calculated as 16,698. So 16,698, approximately 17,000. That's exactly breaking even. I don't think I'll go ahead and hire her because what is the point of doing all this nonsense if I'm getting the same expected value? So I'll not hire her. I'll ignore her. Okay. That's how we determine the value of the information. Is that clear, guys? Now the thing is, sir, who gives us all these predictions and probabilities and all that stuff? That's how you find out. That's all the information that we find out from the market now. Okay. Got it? Okay, good. Chalo, moving on to the next topic. So we're done with risk and uncertainty. Let's start with chapter number 10, budgeting. Let's start with budgeting then. Oh my God. Okay. So, sir, coming to the budgeting part, let's just very quickly see the summary of this topic and then I'll try to finish it off in the next 30-40 minutes and then we'll move on to another chapter if possible. If possible, let me just check if there is any typical or tricky topic in this. Nah, easy only, dummy topic only. We'll go far off. We'll go very quickly. So see, what in this chapter, what we are going to do in this budgeting chapter is basically we are going to understand what is budgeting, why it is required, how it is done, what are the different types of budgeting, what are the different types of communication, top down, bottom up, and then different types of budgeting, rolling budget, incremental budget, zero based budget, activity based budget, feed forward controls, all that stuff, different types of budgets. Then we are going to discuss about when these budgets are useful and how these budgets are prepared. at what point of time which type of budget becomes more useful for the company, which is more suitable at what point of time, then what is the information that is useful for creating these budgets, and then see usefulness and the problems associated with different types of budgeting, flexed budgets, rolling budgets, and activity based budgets, how do we prepare them. Beyond budgeting model, that is over and above the budgeting, there are so many other aspects of an organization that we need to control. So how do we look into those aspects we are going to discuss. And then issues surrounding setting the difficulty level of budget, already we discussed in first chapter. If a target is set too difficult, people will get demotivated because they are like, sir, anyways we are not going to achieve that. If the target is becoming too easy, people will become lethargic. They'll be like, okay, anyways I can do it very easily, so I'll not do it. So you'll have to set a target which is competitive in nature. So that's what they're going to talk about. And then changing the budgetary systems, what are the issues with that, and explain how budgetary systems can deal with uncertainty in them. Chapter 2, so as so 2 chapters today as planned, attainable and ideal standards. Okay. 2 chapters as planned. Okay, let's do no problem. We have 4 more chapters after this, and there are 2 more days. So we are on track, but I'll have to spend 1 complete day on variances. So I'll have to cover 1 more chapter today. That's fine. I'll do it. No worries. Okay. So coming to the purpose of budget, sir, why do we prepare budgets in the first place? So that we can plan our future. We can like basically know like at this particular level of activity, what will be the profit, what can happen if this thing happens, and basically just a what do you call it, a process of planning for this particular aspect. And then controlling the aspects, like if things are going according to the plan, then that's fine. If things are not going according to the budget, if things are going wrong, then how do we deal with such kind of a situation? How do we control the situation? Then communication, so that the budgets can be easily communicated with the rest of the people, and you can tell them this is what is expected out of you, this is what you have to do. A proper communication channel will be established through preparing budgets. And then coordination, people will start talking to each other because of the budgets. Like basically they'll be like, for this particular division to do this much, how much your division should do. So if the production department is not producing the goods, how will the sales department sell them out? Right? There has to be a communication and coordination between different aspects of your business. If raw material is not being purchased properly by the purchase department, how will the production department do the production activities? There has to be a coordination, and for this coordination to happen, there has to be budgets. Sir, how will purchase department know how much to buy? Based on the budgets that are set by the management. So it has to create a coordination between the different departments, and evaluation will become possible only if we set budgets in place. So unless we have budgets, there is nothing for us to compare with. If I prepared a budget upfront, I know that, okay, I'll have to compare my budget with my actual, and then I can evaluate whether they are doing good, better, or best, or worst, right? If I know that the production department has to produce 1,000 units in a month, they are producing only 800. So I know I have a standard to compare with, that is called budget, right? So we can do evaluation based on the budgets. It gives employees the motivation to further work further. They know that, okay, I have a target of 1,000, so I'll have to achieve it. If they don't have those targets, if they don't have those budgets in place, they don't have anything to work towards. They don't have an end goal in mind. And it sets authorization. So when I gave budget, it indirectly means that I have already given authorization to act. I told my store, or else I can say I told my HR that the budgeted salaries for this particular period of 6 months is 5 lakhs per month. It means I already authorized my HR to spend a maximum of 5 lakhs. Anything above that, he has to come for my approval. Up to 5 lakhs, he can go ahead, because that is a budget that is given to him. Within that budget, he need not come to me for authorization. And delegation. Managers, if they are involved in setting the budgets, they get more responsibility. See, if I'm asking you guys, like first at the chapter beginning, at the beginning of the lecture itself, see, this is a small technique that I play around. Okay, this is small secret. So what happens is, when I ask the students, okay, which chapter do you want to do today? This is something that I usually do in the regular classes, not for this revisions and fast tracks and all that stuff. Regular classes, when we have like 60 hours, 30 days, 40 days to do the syllabus, then I ask them, which chapter do you want to do today? So when a choice is given to the people, they feel privileged, they feel responsible. Okay, so this is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi does. Yes, very clearly this is what he does. If you understand very properly, if you think carefully, what he did is, during the first wave of lockdown, he did exactly the same thing. He made people believe that they are taking a part in the fight against COVID, like lighting those candles, or else clapping at 7 o'clock in the night, or whatever it is. He made you feel responsible towards that. Since you are taking a part in some activity, you feel responsible towards that, and you feel more obligated to perform whatever is being said, whatever commands are being given. So it's kind of a psychological behavior. When you make people think that they are taking part in something, they become more responsible, they become more what do you call it, obedient, I can say. Yeah. So that's the power of delegation. Anyways, that's what we are going to talk about. So when you ask the managers to come and sit in the meeting and tell them that, okay sir, this time we are preparing the budget, please give your inputs, please tell us how many units the production department can produce. He'll say that I think they can produce 20,000 units, sir. Okay, so you think they can produce 20,000, let's do something, we'll give them a target of 25. Sir, already management decided to give a target of 25. They'll just ask this manager so that to know where exactly this guy is standing, and he feels that, okay, I'm also taking a part in this particular. So when they say that, okay, you say 20, so we'll give them a small extra target of 25. This guy will go out and he'll be like, you know what, I just decided with the management, so we are giving a target of 25,000 for you guys for this month, so shut up and work. This guy becomes over motivated just because he was given a seat in the meeting. This is something that is very psychological aspect. Many people do that, unfortunately. At this point, at this age and time, it should not work. It should not work. You should know, just because you are given a seat at a meeting does not mean they are giving you value. You should know that if your outputs are actually considered, then it is the value given to you, not just making you sit at a meeting or giving you these taglines. This is something that is very natural in the present economic markets. This is something that students should know, because you guys are going to be in the job market very soon, if not already. I know some of you are already in job markets. So your companies play with your mindset. They'll just give you a promotion, associate manager to assistant manager, salary hike 5,000 rupees. What are you supposed to do? Sir, now I'm an assistant manager, sir, not associate. God bless your soul. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference to anybody. No difference at all. It's just a psychological factor to make you feel precious. You think that, okay, I got a promotion within 1 year. God bless your soul. No promotion, nothing. If you change your company, you'll get more than 20-30% of increment. They're giving you 5,000 rupees. So don't fall prey for such kind of nonsense things. You need to understand it's just a psychological factor that they're playing against you. Okay. Now coming to the budgets and performance management. So why do we need budgets? Basically, different examples they're taking you. You can give detailed sales target by preparing a budget. You can tell them that, okay, these are the monthly breakups of sales targets. Each product wise, this is the breakup. Each product in each zone or each sales area or each POS, point of sale. So you can give detailed sales targeted, broke down targets and all that stuff. You can prepare staffing plannings, like how many employees we should hire, how many labor we should hire. All of that you will get to know based on the budget solely. You'll know the production levels and production capabilities based on budget. Cash investment and borrowing. Sir, unless you prepare a budget, you don't know how much cash you will require, and you don't know whether you should invest your money or whether you should borrow some more money. You will know that only when you prepare a budget, and you will see that, okay, my salary is 50,000. I have an expenses of 35,000. So I'll have 15,000 surplus. So if I save it for 10 months, I'll have 1,50,000. Maybe in 11th month, I want to purchase a bike or a car or something. So you can prepare a budget based on that. Then only you will know how much cash you have surplus or deficit. Capital expenditure, just like I told you, bike or a car or something you wanted to purchase. So basically, how do I do that? That's what we are going to talk about. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, then the performance hierarchy, we already know this. Strategic level, tactical level, operational level. We discussed this like long ago, sir. Ages back only, we already discussed all of this. Now, behavioral aspects of budgets. Okay, so please see here. Just now I told you we were talking about this behavioral aspects only. There is a topic called Hopwood's management style. There are 3 different types of management styles according to Hopwood. What are those 3 different management styles, sir? One is called as budget constraint style. Second one is called profit constraint style. And the third one is called non-profit style. Okay, look at this. You have 3 different types of budget management. One is called budget constrained style. Second one is profit conscious, and the third one is non-accounting, non-profit or non-accounting basically. Sir, I'll directly give you explanation of this without reading all these things. So let's see. First of all, manager who is following a budget constrained style of management. So this manager is very, very bureaucratic. What does that mean, sir? Bureaucratic means having a strict rules based system. Basically, he's like, okay, this is the rule, you have to follow it. I don't want you to go beyond the rule at any cost. So what this guy will do is, he will set an environment where he will evaluate the people only based on their performance in comparison with the budget. I gave you a budget to sell $20,000 this month. How much did you sell? Sir, I sold $18,000. Okay, go ahead and sit, because you did only 90% of your target. You were underperforming by 10%. Now that guy is like, sir, but COVID, I don't know anything. I gave you a budget, you have to meet that budget. That's all. I don't care about the reasons. I don't care about anything else. Quantitative factors, I don't care. I only qualitative factors. I'm only concerned about budget, whether you meet the budget or not. Okay. See, performance evaluation. The manager evaluated on the ability to achieve budget in the short term. Only budget, sir, nothing else. Managers will be criticized for poor results if the spending is more than the given budgeted limit. If the sales are less than the budgeted sales, they're basically criticized. You'll have more job related pressures when you do that. Sir, if budgets and all are there, no, job related pressures will be very high. You guys know targets and all that stuff. And so what that does to the employee is that they will try to figure out ways in which they can gain advantage, or I can say that they'll try to figure out a method, or they'll try to do something that is not fair. They'll try to manipulate the data to make sure that they meet the targets. That is something that is a problem. Second type of style is profit conscious style. So these guys are not worried about the budgets now. As long as you are bringing profits to the company, I am fine. How you are bringing profits, I don't care. This is again a biggest problem with this style of budgeting. They say as long as you are bringing profits, we are fine with it. So the employees go for short-term profit-making strategies. They'll sell at a higher prices. They'll go for cheap quality of raw materials. They'll not pay the labor properly. All these things will give you better profits in the short term, but in the long term, you are gone, man. So that is the biggest problem with profit conscious style. And the third one is non-accounting style. These guys are not worried about profits, budgets, and all that stuff. They are worried about the qualitative factors. What kind of environment are you creating in the company?